Welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun-jung Cho. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for an exponential increase in nuclear arsenal and the development of new intercontinental ballistic missiles in the new year. The U.S. and South Korean officials are discussing ways to start joint nuclear planning and tabletop exercises. Today, we'll discuss whether it's a viable strategy for North Korea to keep pace with the U.S. and South Korean military posture.
전술 핵무기 다량 생산의 중요성과 필요성을 부각시켜주고 나라의 핵탄 보유량을 기하급수적으로 누릴 것을 요구하고 있다고 하면서
President Biden and President Moon tasked their teams to plan for an effective, coordinated response to a range of scenarios, including nuclear use by North Korea.
In the studio with me today, Mr. Mark Tokola, Vice President of the Korea Economic Institute of America. Mr. Tokola served as Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. embassies in Seoul, Ulaanbaatar, and Reykjavik. He retired as U.S. Senior Foreign Service Officer at the rank of Minister Counselor in 2014. Also with us, Colonel David Maxwell, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and a Global Peace Foundation where he focuses on a free and unified Korea. Colonel Maxwell was a war planner for the United Nations Command and the Combined Forces Command. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Now, Mr. Tokola, North Korea, many of its missile launches last year, North Korea says it is corresponding measures to U.S. and South Korean military drills. On the last day of 2022, North Korea fired a super large multiple rocket launcher, which was just a day after South Korea successfully launched solid fueled rocket. North Korea also launched a lot of missiles against South Korea and U.S.'s Vigilant Storm exercises. So given North Korea's weak military and economic status, is it a viable strategy that North Korea tries to keep pace with U.S. and RK military posture?
Well, thank you for having us on. I'm not sure North Korea is trying to keep pace. I think the reason they have a nuclear and missile program in cyber is because they cannot keep pace with the U.S. and RK militaries. But even beyond that, the North Korean nuclear and missile development has been going on steadily for years, regardless of what U.S. and South Korea were doing. It follows its own internal logic.
I'm saying keeping pace because North Korea just as like a tit for tat. When South Korea does military drill, North Korea launches missile. When South Korea launches a solid fuel rocket, North Korea launches missile. That's what I was saying as North Korea keeping pace.
But I think North Korea is following an engineering calendar, not looking at what happens in South Korean exercises. It takes a long time to prepare a test. And the way North Korea's been operating is they've been testing steadily to develop their weaponry. So there was a huge amount of testing last year. I think that might have happened regardless of anything South Korea and the United States were doing.
Colonel Maxwell, do you agree that North Korea doing regardless of South Korean actions and military posture?
Absolutely. I think it's, they conduct their weapons tests for really three reasons. Number one is to test to advance. They must test their weapons to advance their capabilities. The second is part of their political warfare and blackmail diplomacy strategies. So they're trying to undermine the South Korean political system and the relationship with the United States. And then third is blackmail diplomacy to gain concessions, economic and political concessions, by conducting provocations.
Colonel Maxwell, on the first half of 2023, the U.S. and RK planned 20 military drills in the scale of Full Eagle, which was suspended in 2019. Will North Korea have enough missiles to correspond and shoot those missiles whenever there's a drill?
That's an unknown. I think, I would certainly like to see them use up their entire arsenal, but I think that they probably have sufficient. And of course, what we've seen also is a wide variety of types: short-range ballistic missiles, which are the majority, medium range, intermediate range, and of course, ICBM type missiles. So I think that they are using a wide range from their arsenal, and they will likely respond. But the point of all the exercises is defense of the Republic of Korea, and maintaining a ready military to deter any kind of North Korean attack.
North Korean complaints about exercises have gone on for decades. This is an old story. North Korea knows exercises very well and what they're for. And they've never offered to cut their own down. North Korea exercises also. So if North Korea ever offered to reduce its own exercises in exchange for reciprocal measure, I might take them more seriously, but they never have.
And of course, they're conducting their winter training cycle right now, which is an advanced military exercise. However, to reinforce Mark's point, some of the training has been curtailed because of the lack of food. And this is really one reason why North Korea continues to develop these advanced missiles and other asymmetric capabilities, cyber, because its conventional military is suffering because of the failed economy, because of the deliberate policy decisions that Kim Jong-un is making.
Mr. Tokola, President Yoon Suk-yeol called for an overwhelming response to North Korea's provocations. Do you think such South Korean response will drain out North Korean assets, similar to the O-Plan 5030 in 2003 under Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld? Also, just before the Soviet collapse, USSR's finances were under strain from an arms race with the US. Do you see a parallel in the situation on the Korean Peninsula?
Yes, I do, but not the one you're saying. It's a different kind of parallel. I think it's a mythology about the fall of the Soviet Union. I do not believe that they fell because of being bankrupted by an arms race with the United States. Some say that, but I don't think that's true. I think the Soviet Union eventually fell because of its internal weakness. Its own economy was failing, regardless of its arms programs. So the parallel in North Korea is not that we're bankrupt in North Korea. The parallel is North Korea is struggling economically, the same way the Soviet Union did. We'll have to change course if it's going to survive.
But it's the fact that North Korea is draining its assets by doing all these missile launches.
Yeah, they are doing that, and I think they're paying a price for it. There's not a choice between guns and butter, as economists say. It's between a successful North Korea, the party, and the weapons program. I think they're hurting their own interest.
And I would say that also Kim Jong-un probably will not stop until he recognizes that this strategy is a failure. He is the one that is conducting the failing strategy. South Korea and the United States are unlikely, and I hope never will, make concessions in the face of these threats that Kim Jong-un is making.
Now, President Yoon urged the military to stand ready to retaliate, even if that means risking escalation. Colonel Maxwell, do you agree with South Korean opposition party criticism that such hardline policy heightens tensions on the Korean Peninsula and also raises the possibility of a miscalculation by both sides?
Well, we should be careful of the rhetoric from all sides, and remember this: every country has the right to self-defense. And so if attacked, South Korea can defend itself. And it can respond with proportional force at the time and place of the provocation. We also should keep in mind that Kim Jong-un, despite all the criticism, is smart. And he knows that he cannot attack into strength. To do so would be suicide. And so retaliation is really not the right word. The right word is really defending South Korea and using all means necessary to defend South Korea. And that can include a kinetic response. And so I think that we shouldn't talk about retaliation. We should talk about defense. And South Korea has every right to defend itself against the hostile actions by Kim Jong-un.
Even if it brings about escalation?
I think that it is unlikely to bring about escalation because, as I said, Kim Jong-un is smart enough to know that he cannot attack into strength. He is looking for weakness. And we have seen many engagements across the DMZ, in the West Sea, along the NLL, that have not escalated. And that is a testament, I think, really to the testament of the soldiers and sailors on both sides of the DMZ. They have fought it out. They have conducted deadly exchanges of fire, but it has not escalated because the military knows the cost of escalation.
Mr. Tokola, President Yoon said he would consider suspending the 2018 Comprehensive Military Agreement if North Korea invades South Korea's airspace again. What is the advantage of suspending this military agreement?
Yeah, I would not suspend it without getting something in return for that. I think there's two reasons to suspend it. One would be if President Yoon makes a statement, such as you said, that if North Korea does something, he will suspend it. You have to kind of follow through what you threatened to do. So there'd be a reason to do it. The second reason would be if South Korea really wanted to do something on its own, that's being blocked from doing by the CMA. And I don't think that's happening. I think it's better for them to keep the agreement as it is because it puts North Korea in the wrong. Every time North Korea violates the agreement, they're showing that they're not prepared to abide by agreements. South Korea's in the right. So I wouldn't give it up without a reason.
I was opposed to the agreement in 2018 for the very reason that a piece of paper does not protect South Korea, does not enhance South Korean defenses. And the agreement did not reduce the threat to South Korea, and in fact, really hamstrung South Korea and the alliance. So I was opposed to it. However, I agree with Mark. President Yoon should not abrogate the agreement. But I do think that parts of it should be suspended, particularly the no-fly zone along the DMZ, live fire training of frontline forces. Those areas that enhance the readiness of the military to defend itself, they should be, South Korea should be able to follow through, conduct that training, and defend itself.
There's going to be investigation into what happened in the drone intrusion. What results should we be seeing from that, especially when it comes to the border area?
Well, the drone attacks, frankly, are difficult to defend against. These are very small and difficult. I think we're going to see enhanced training, development of new technology, fielding of new equipment. I think that South Korea will be learning from Ukraine, from Azerbaijan, the fights that took place there. Drone warfare is increasing, and so there's a lot to learn. I think that you're going to see enhanced military operations by South Korea. I hope the investigation doesn't reveal that it is the comprehensive military agreement that brought a sense of complacency to the frontline forces, because it's supposed to be a no-fly zone. And so if that is the case, that really illustrates how much damage the comprehensive military agreement has done to South Korea.
Now, Mr. Tokola, South Korea successfully test-fired solid-fueled space launch vehicle, and this is the same technology as ICBM. And North Korea's logic is that the world is applying double standards, that only criticizing North Korea for the weapons development. How would you answer North Korea?
Well, there's only a single standard. The single standard is that North Korea violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2006. And that led the United Nations to impose Security Council Resolution 1695, which prohibits North Korea from developing ballistic missiles. It's because North Korea's behavior, because it broke the treaty it signed, that it's suffering these penalties for a missile program. South Korea is not in that position. South Korea has not violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And South Korea is part of the missile technology control regime. 35 countries share information about missile technology. So South Korea is a good member of the international community. North Korea's broken agreements. There's only a single standard.
And we should remember that South Korea is an advanced, peaceful nuclear power. 24 nuclear power plants, exporting nuclear energy around the world, and developing the capability to conduct space exploration. Space is the province of the future. Economically, it's going to be very necessary. And so South Korea is developing the capabilities to explore space. And this is just another illustration of how advanced South Korea is relative to North Korea, that they're able to do this. And in fact, this past week, sending back photographs from the moon from its lunar orbiter.
But Mr. Maxwell, wouldn't the United States, even though South Korea is an ally, South Korea honing same technology, dual-use technology as ICBM, wouldn't the United States have some reservations that just until recently, just a few years ago, there was a limit on how much South Korea can develop the missile technology?
Yes, and I think that the lifting of those limits illustrates the trust and confidence that the allies have. And I don't think that the U.S. is nor Japan is worried about South Korea, because they have proven to be a reliable member of the international community. And so I don't think that and a responsible member of the international community. So I don't think there's any concern on behalf of the United States.
Why did the United States lift the limitations just recently? Wasn't South Korea a reliable country before?
Yes, and I think that that it really is an evolution of the alliance and a necessary recognition for South Korea to have its own missiles that can range the entire threat. And so I think that's why it was lifted. And I think also as the alliance has evolved, there's less reliance on U.S. military capabilities and more on South Korea's own internal indigenous self-defense capabilities.
Will Japan also have anxiousness or uneasiness over South Korea developing its military buildups, just like how South Korea has this anxiousness about Japan's military buildup, Mr. Tokola?
Well, I would say that everyone should be concerned about advances in technology that make war happen faster. So solid fuel missiles are inherently more dangerous because they create a more of an incentive to ratchet up quickly. But having said that, South Korea has every right to defend itself, and it should be responsible. And I think Japan and South Korea have so much in common in terms of needing to defend themselves against the regional threats that I think that advanced improving cooperation between Japan and South Korea is assuaging some of those concerns that might be there otherwise.
And we should realize that every action that North Korea takes really leads to better coordination between Japan and South Korea. We're seeing strengthening to include the discussions about real-time sharing of missile launch information, which I think is the first step to an integrated missile defense system, something North Korea doesn't want to see and China does not want to see, but something that would enhance the national security of all three countries.
Mr. Tokola, President Yoon said South Korea and the U.S. are discussing possible joint planning and joint exercises using U.S. nuclear assets. And President Biden denied the allies were discussing joint nuclear exercises. Soon after, officials from both sides said the allies are looking at enhanced information sharing, joint contingency planning, and eventual tabletop exercises. What did President Biden mean by saying no? We're not having nuclear exercises.
I think there's a terminology question. He was right. There are not going to be any joint nuclear exercises. That doesn't mean there's not going to be joint planning and joint discussion. The extended security group has already met. The U.S. and South Korea have agreed to talk about deterrence in broader ways. Nuclear planning is going to be part of that. So I think it's a mistake of language. It was not actually a mistake of the progress. Nuclear technology is frightening and dangerous, but it's old technology. I'm actually much more interested in U.S.-Korean agreement to have an extended dialogue on defense technology and science. Nuclear weapons are not the future of warfare. The future of warfare is cyberspace, artificial intelligence, unmanned vehicles, directed energy weapons. It's much better the U.S. and Korea be talking about these advanced weapon systems rather than talking about old nuclear technology.
Now, Colonel Maxwell, President Yoon Suk-yeol said that Seoul and Washington together plan, train, execute nuclear assets, then it will be as effective as nuclear sharing. Is it really as effective as nuclear sharing?
Well, first of all, nuclear sharing is a misnomer. The United States will never allow its nuclear weapons to be employed by another country without its decision. So the U.S. will always control the use of U.S. nuclear weapons. It may allow them to be used on other platforms by other countries, but the decision to employ nuclear weapons will always reside with the President and Secretary of Defense in the United States. I think what President Yoon is talking about is all of the contingency planning that is necessary, the ability to defend against North Korean nuclear use, to be able to have resilient militaries, to be able to respond to a nuclear attack, defend itself, work through it, and then be able to conduct continued military action to defeat North Korean forces. So I think that kind of training is necessary, has taken place, will continue to take place, and it will enhance the readiness of both forces.
You just said it has taken place, but what South Korea wants is something different from what it was before. They want more involvement in the planning and the training and the execution stage.
And I think that is taking place. I think that's what the Extended Deterrence Committee is working on. I think when we look at the outcome of the security consultative meetings, that is the way forward. And so I think that President Yoon is expressing, I think, what has already been agreed upon. And I think we have to be careful about the terminology that's being used and recognize that the militaries of both countries understand what needs to be done to enhance deterrence and defense, and they are going to pursue those tactics, techniques, and procedures that will enhance the defense of South Korea.
Mr. Tokola, if South Korea gets more involved in the training and the planning and the execution stage, would that mean that South Korea will lessen its reliance on U.S. powers and U.S. nuclear assets and U.S. military powers? And would that somehow make South Korea more defend itself better and contribute more to the alliance with the United States?
If you look what the United States is saying recently, they were actually moving beyond the idea of extended deterrence. The U.S. is talking about integrated deterrence. That's a new term. And in integrated deterrence, you're integrating the allies as part of the deterrence network, not just the U.S. umbrella being extended, but both the allies being both involved in this integrated deterrence. So it's integrated by allies and also across spectrums. It's not just nuclear. It's about cyber and space and other fields too, and economy. They talk about integrated deterrence as being across the tools of national power. Mm-hmm. So a U.S.-Korea discussion about integrated deterrence would be extremely helpful. I think it's going to happen.
If any one of you can take my question, it seems like both of you are just really emphasizing these powers, these military powers other than nuclear.
Yes.
So is there a reservation on the U.S. side to really share this with South Koreans?
I don't know. I think, as I've mentioned, there's a new agreement that the U.S. and South Korea have a high-level dialogue on defense science and technology. So I think we are going to be discussing all the advanced weapon systems, and that's the future of warfare.
The elephant in the room is South Korean access to decisions to use nuclear weapons. I think that's what you're really asking about. And I think that's what South Koreans, they want access to nuclear weapons. And frankly, just as in NATO, the United States is not going to give up the decision to use nuclear weapons. That is a U.S. decision and will always be a U.S. decision, despite rhetoric about nuclear sharing and things like that. And so I think that I know the military understands that. I think politicians need to have a better understanding of nuclear power and an understanding of the nuclear relationships.
If I could elaborate a little bit on that, because I think it's important people understand what the nuclear sharing arrangements are. There are such things in NATO, but what it actually means is 5 countries, as we understand it, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, and Turkey, have nuclear weapons on their soil, but they're controlled by the United States, and they cannot be authorized for use except by the U.S. President, the British Prime Minister, and the NATO Nuclear Planning Group, the NPG. These countries have the burden of having nuclear weapons on their soil, but they have no independent ability to use them. That's what the nuclear sharing agreement is.
The current international environment, whether somebody calls it Cold War or not, that's a whole debate. But there's more close alignment between US, South Korea, and Japan, between China, Russia, and North Korea. And under this environment, is it more conducive for North Korea to develop its weapons?
It does make it easier, because we no longer have a coalition of countries that will sanction North Korea effectively. China and Russia won't do that. So that makes it easier for them to develop weapons. And the world's attention is being spent elsewhere. We've been very focused on COVID and now on Ukraine. So we're not focused on North Korea. So in that lack of attention environment, they're probably able to develop more weaponry.
Now, Colonel Maxwell, before we go, will China again sit idly by this year when North Korea does all these provocations?
I think so. I think that China's interest is no war on the peninsula, no instability, and they can tolerate the nuclear threat. I don't think we can expect China to solve South Korea's or the United States security problem. I think that they want to maintain the status quo with no significant changes. Also, as Mark has mentioned, they are complicit, along with Russia, in sanctions evasion activities because they want to keep North Korea afloat. But lastly, I think North Korea provides China and Russia a certain advantage by having North Korea create security dilemmas for the United States. And so I think that is really in China's interest. So the answer to your question is no, I don't expect China to solve the North Korean nuclear problem or any of the security problems on the Korean Peninsula.
I'll differ just a little bit. I think China is concerned about the North Korean nuclear weapons program because they never talk about it. But I think North Korean nuclear weapons could pose a threat to China too. They need to be concerned about that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Mr. Tokola, Colonel Maxwell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and Happy New Year. We'll be back here next week with U.S. experts to discuss the 2 Koreas and the region right here from Washington.